Welcome to the Steps Back to Me podcast. On this show, we talk about all things that empower you to take control of your life and win it. I'm your host, Deb J. On this podcast, we're on a mission to provide guidance, emotional support, and practical tools that will inspire you on your path to living your best life ever. My guest on today's show is Reverend Evelyn Foreman. She is an inspiring spiritual leader who teaches the power of living in Christ consciousness, aligning with love, compassion, and unity as Jesus exemplified. As the founder of the Legacy Love Project, Evie empowers others to lead mindful, intentional lives, offering practical spiritual wisdom for a generous, open heart. She is a minister, an author, and a speaker with a rich background in spiritual leadership and holistic wellness. Here's my conversation with Evie. Welcome, Evie.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It is my joy and my pleasure to talk to you anytime. You know this. And the fact that this is recorded and being posted on your podcast, it's just going to enrich other women, because I'm kind of envisioning our conversation being able to reach those who really want to and also need to hear it. You know, it's a lot of times we don't plan for these things, but it is the divine connection that leads you to wherever you need to go to hear whatever it is message that you need to hear. So this is an unplanned conversation, and I love it because it just gets to be in real time, and we just speak our hearts like we always do.
I'm so glad you're here. There have been times we've been on the phone and I've said, oh, I wish we were recording this because it's so good and it's so rich. So here we are having our phone conversation on camera. I want you to just, kind of start from the beginning. Give us a history of who Evelyn is. And, I'll go between Evie and Evelyn because there are moments that are Evie moments and others that are Evelyn moments.
I love that. Evie moments and Evelyn moments. I love it. Okay, yes. So I'm happy to share my story. I have lived a Fantasia experience. Are you familiar with the Joy Luck Club?
I am not.
Okay, so Joy Luck Club is a novel written by Amy Tan, Tan. She is a Chinese American who wrote about her origins and her culture and the way that she grew up and the culture in which she grew up. So I relate to her, obviously, because I'm Chinese and I'm American. I think she was born here. I wasn't born here. But there's always, if you're the color of your skin, right, the race or the culture that you come from versus traditional America, there's always this like, okay, I have my own thing, and then I have the normal American thing, the popular culture. And growing up, there's always an identity crisis. Like, am I Chinese? Do I speak English? Do I speak Chinese? Like forever. So she wrote, like, I can relate to her because she's really good at putting the pieces together. And she's been really influential in my growing up. So she wrote this book called The Joy Luck Club. And the good news is, people who are listening to this, it's also a movie. So if you're not a reader, the book is so good. But if you're not a reader, you can go watch the movie. But it helped me understand my journey. So she wrote about the past of people in China running from their country and suffering and all of that stuff to modern day. And she's just a really gifted writer. So I was going to say all that to tell you that I have one of those stories. Our birth story, your birth story came way before you. You are the legacy of your mom and then your grandmother, et cetera, et cetera. So as far back as I remember from the oral stories, my story began in China. And during the revolution in the 1800s, my grandmother and the family, at least this is from my mom's side, because I don't know a whole lot from my dad's side, but they migrated down from Canton, China, where Hong Kong is. So the revolution caused them to migrate south, and there's this big diaspora of people. So my people would be considered the tribe of Hakka, Hakka, and in Chinese, that means guest people. So back in the day, we were like the Mongolians, we would go from place to place to place, and we would migrate, and we would visit all these different towns, but we would take everything with us. This is back in the day. And so much so that we just banded together and we'd travel. And then there was a diaspora of the Hakanese people, and they went from Canton to everywhere Southeast Asian, including Hong Kong. There's a big contingency of the Hakanese in Hong Kong.
So
You
it's
wanted me to
it's
tell you
it's
the
kind of
story,
like,
so I'm telling you the story.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of like the gyps. You're kind of like the
Yes.
gypsies of the
Yes.
Chinese.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
The traveling
Hmm.
gypsies. Except what I understand, someone told me that in today's world, the word gypsy is actually a derogatory term. I don't take it as
I
that. I
meant
don't know why.
I meant that as the people,
Yeah,
like
I know.
the
I know.
people that,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know
So
why. I don't take it as I'm so proud to be a Chinese gypsy because people can relate
right,
to that and they understand, you know.
right,
And to this
right.
day, I'm a modern day gypsy because I travel a lot and I move a lot. It's in my blood. So anyway, so from there, they migrated down to Vietnam. That's where my family was, and my mom. They had their babies. My mom and my dad met in Vietnam, and then they had their babies there. And I'm the last, the baby of 8 in the family. And when I turned 5, okay, so the war happened in 73. No, the war happened in 65. I was born in 73.
So
Vietnam, it used to be a democratic society, open free commerce. And then when the war happened and the government hands actually switched over, it became a communist country. So everything was converting into a communist state, which includes, like all the masses of wealth that people have accumulated over the years because of free commerce. But at least the democratic system, I don't know if it's masses of wealth, but the democratic system enables you to make money and keep your wealth and build, etc. In the communist society,
mhm,
that's not allowed. Everything is equal. They started to convert any paper dollars that you have into communist dollars so that you don't own anything. And it was just, can you imagine America being that way? you know like
wow.
my family, I actually have some memories of this. Like my family went through where the communists would come over to the house to knock on the door to make sure that you're registered to the house. If you live in the communist state, if you're not registered to that household, you're not allowed to stay there overnight. And because of the war, my mom, who's a merchant, very democratic, we left on a boat. So we were one of those refugee boat people. I almost died on the trip, and then ended up in California, where I grew
Yeah.
up. And then a bunch of other things
Maybe,
happened.
yeah, you know what? Yeah, you know what? I do want you to kind of tell a little bit of what you remember from being a refugee child, because
Sure.
I think that's important to give people a context for where you are now, who you've grown
Yeah.
up to be.
Yeah. Okay, sure. So, in order to tell that story and give it context, you got to know my family background. So, my mom is a beautician by trade. So her dad died when she was 8 years old. And she had these uncles that were obviously brothers of her dad, who continued to raise her. And her dad was the person who owned the beauty salon. So when he passed on, the uncle said, Amy, you can do this. This is my mom. You can do this because we're gonna help you through it. We're gonna train you and you're going to run the business. She was 8. Okay, different time, right? So she started messing around with hair when she was 8. By the time she was 12 years old, she was running the place. So she's very gifted, very creative. People loved her. She became really successful in that she was always booked and the lines would go around the building, and she was always very, very busy. And as a result, her business grew and grew and grew. So much so that she gathered enough money and wealth and riches. And what she did during the changing of the regime is she took the money that she made and she immediately turned it into gold and she hid it away so that it doesn't depreciate in value, because gold, it holds its value, right? It's not paper money that they can just take away. I never once lived in a house with all of my siblings because they were everywhere. So that's part of my family background. So she bought us seats on this boat. It was my mom, my grandmother, 2 sisters, and then myself, and I was 5 at the time. And I have a lot of memories of sneaking out in the middle of the night and getting onto the boat. So a lot of my shadowy stuff and a lot of my sense of safety, I can say, still relate back to the very scary episode of leaving the country, of sneaking out, because if you were caught, you were either going to be shot or you're going to be thrown in jail. And I remember all the adults, my sisters, my mom, my grandmother telling me, be quiet so they don't find us. Remember, I was 5. So 5-year-old children, like, like in their own, they like to play, and they would play. I remember them like coercing me, like, okay, we're going to play a game. Let's be quiet. Shh, shh, shh. It's always like keep silent. And the result of that as an adult, part of that is, there's that era. Okay, don't say anything. Don't be seen. Don't be heard because it's not safe. And that's still running in my background, right? We met somewhere. We got on a bus. It was really quiet, in the middle of the night. And this bus was rickety. There were a lot of people there. And then we would get to the dock, and we would actually, it's not even on a dock. It was like a mountainside, and we would like creep down the side of the mountain with no lights because you don't want people to know. People are filing in, and then we would board the boat. And when we board the boat, you think it's just like the ferry that goes from one island to another where there's like seats and you can just pile in or whatever. There were no seats on there. People sat on the floor, butt cheek to butt cheek, and it was that full. It was a teeny tiny fisherman's boat, and there were about 146, mostly women and children on board, along with your
Right.
stuff, which is like your knapsack and maybe your personal like a sack of your personal belongings. Then you sat with your stuff around you. And that was your home for
Right.
however long the journey was.
So
Even
you've
now.
you've come to the States and
Oh, what happens then? Okay,
yeah.
so that whole thing happened, and then I came to the States. I was 5, didn't go to kindergarten, and I started school, I think when I was 6. My birthday just fell in. And we were on welfare because we had to get sponsored by a church to be here. So mom had help from government assistance, and I got a lot of her qualities. She's really determined person. She's a hard worker, and she cared nothing more than for her children. So everything she ever does, any decision she makes, it's for her kids. So she got up and running, and started um, doing hair. She knew enough people back in the old country to know the people who are here now in Southern California that still remember her as the person who had that shop back in Vietnam. And so we didn't have a car. So she got a bus pass. She threw all of her hair curling irons, her scissors. Remember those big hair dryers, right, for your hair? She had one of those. I remember that. And she put it in a little luggage, and she would take the bus and go make her appointments in different parts of LA to do that for I don't know how many years. But she would come home late at night, sometimes 10, 11 o'clock, and she'd leave, and she was always working. I was a latchkey child as a result of that. Several years later, she saved enough money to buy a brand new car. So then she started going to appointments in her car, right? Which is amazing to me because she came with nothing. And then she eventually saved enough money to buy her own salon. So during this whole time, I was just being a good girl, right? Because I saw what mom had to go through. So I'm just going to do my thing. That's the best way I can help, is to stay in the lines, color in the lines, don't make a big fuss, and be obedient to what was asked of me, which is let myself in after school, take care of myself. So as a result of that, Deb, I am a very independent person. I figured things out. It's like, you don't need to tell me to make dinner. I'm hungry. I'm going to go make dinner. That kind of thing. Like, it's like some children have parents just say, okay, do this and this and this. But I pretty much just figured it out. And I used to love watching my mom cook on the weekends, and I learned how to cook from her.
I want to hear now more about Evie. So you've you're in this, you're here, you're in school, I guess, kindergarten, first grade. coming, you couldn't speak the language. How
Not a
was your
lick.
interaction? Yeah, how was your interaction with other children, people that you came in contact with?
I didn't speak much English, but I do remember them teaching me ABCs when I was in Vietnam. Um, I knew my ABCs, but that's to the extent that I know. Some children grow up in the States and they retain an accent because of their mother tongue. Some children don't. So I guess I chose not to because I don't have a mother, like English now is my mother tongue because it's been so many years and that's how I communicate. So I grew up and I was in Southern California there. I went to a school that was more inland in the San Gabriel Valley, and we had a lot more minorities there. So Asians and Latinos, Hispanic people were there. Very few Black people, very few white people. It was just a mix. And even in that culture, there's still some of my best, I still am in touch with some of these people that speak Spanish. So I got a lot of like, I feel like I got the culture. But even though I'm Asian and they're Hispanic, I still was called names. You know, like when you're a child,
Yeah.
right? You would
Hmm.
get
Yeah.
called names and people make, I mean, it was just part of it. And I didn't think anything of it,
Yeah.
but I had some of that. I don't know if that's allowed these days. Is that? I don't think so.
No, no, that would be considered bullying.
Oh, okay.
Not just considered, it was bullying, it is bullying, but it's
Yeah.
dealt with differently now. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that was hard, hardship that was just life, right?
Just life.
So
Yeah.
let's kind of come forward and let's talk a little bit more about some of the hardships that you've struggled with yourself, obviously seeing your mom, learning from her how to deal with them, and then come forward and tell us now what you do, who you are now.
Okay. When I was 14, my dad came to the States and he and my mom got back together for about 2 years. And in that period of time, and I never knew this, but they don't get along. My dad was an alcoholic and he was an abusive alcoholic and he was a violent alcoholic. There was domestic violence involved. And mind you, I grew up in a very quiet household, right? By myself. My mom's always working, blah, blah. And now there's this man in our life. And I just felt like this is not a father. This is just a man that came into my life and now beating up my mom. Like, what do I do with all this, right? There were times when the police came and the counselor sat down with me and she said, okay, I don't know what you're getting out of this, but this is not your fault. She ended up passing away 2 years after he came back into her life. Um, and then I became really independent because I just said, well, I have all these sisters. I'm not going to let anyone take care of me because, I was really bullheaded at the time. I was very stubborn, very independent child, right? It's like, I'm going to stand up on my own 2 feet and I'm ready. So I got a part-time job while I was still in high school. I was driving as soon as I could when I was 15 and a half. I lived with my sister for that 1 year and I finished high school and then I started college. I worked 3 jobs when I was in college. Um, Crazy experience. I rushed a sorority, had a full-time boyfriend on my mom's deathbed. I had promised her, I was still the good girl, right? Mom, I promise you this. And this was when I was 16. I said, I am going to not let you live your life in vain. And because I know that you have worked really hard to sacrifice so much for me to even be here, to be alive, I am so very grateful. And I'm going to do what I can to live the best life that I can. And that is to honor your life. That is to honor your legacy. And I didn't even know that I had this in me back then. But that was my
Wow.
solemn promise to her when she passed. And that really is my guiding light in everything that I do, because I remember who came before me. And I remember the shoulders that I stood on. Sometimes we forget that so many people have lived such intense lives just to get us here today. And right here, as
Yeah.
we stand, we have the opportunity of a lifetime and to make, break, change all of that generational energy patterns that have come before us, that I don't think that we stop to get present to it because we're so caught up with life itself. Because if you stop to think about the value of your life in all of existence, beyond the dinosaurs and in the future, no one is ever going to come around that is you, that is me. The DNA is there, the energy body is there, the learning, the history, the family, the thought pattern. And this is it. It's not a dress rehearsal. This is it. So whatever it is that is stopping me from being exactly who God intended me to be, right? Let's
Yeah.
get that nonsense scooted out so we can be who we are.
That is so important. Just that concept of life, the life we have is the one life we have. Now is the time. Now is what we have. And I say to a friend of mine all the time, focus on not siphoning away your energy to all these other things. Focus on concentrating your energy on who you are, who you've been called to be, what your purpose is. And if you don't know those things, stop for a moment and figure it out so that you can live a purposeful life. I love that you said to your mom, I will live my life so that your life wasn't lived in vain. That's really that concept of generate honoring the generations that's gone on before you, especially those in your family, is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so you went on to college.
I went to college. I finished in 3.5 years. I got two majors and a minor in those 3.5 years. Like my whole thing about finishing college quickly was I didn't want to mess around. You know, people go and they drink and they have a college experience. My whole mentality was, the sooner I finish my degree, the sooner I can get a job and the sooner I can stop working 3 jobs to make ends meet. So I did that and I got a corporate job. I worked for the insurance company. It was great for me because I learned how to be a professional at that job. I matured a lot through that experience. And in that period of time, from college to getting my first job, I also participated in many pageants. Can you believe that? So I learned
Nice.
how to
Okay.
stay poised and hold myself and talk to others and became an ambassador for, just different things. And you tell me today, like, oh, you were in a pageant. That was so long ago. It's like, oh yeah, I was. And I was a teeny bopper cheerleader and I was a band geek and all that stuff. Those are all integrated. Like nothing gets wasted, right? They just they're little
Yeah.
parts of all we are. So I'm sharing my story so intricately because I know that people are listening and they're like, oh, I just didn't do very much. But yes, you did. You just don't remember it because maybe you forgot about it because life got lifey. But all of that is who you are. And those are exact experiences that make you who you are today.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
refer to it as the threads that you use to weave or to
Yes.
knit or to crochet
Yes.
the person, the tapestry of the person that you are now.
Yep.
So it's important to remember those little things. And that's part of why we're doing this storytelling. It's remember, yes, there have been some parts that we can focus on that where we've been hurt and we've been traumatized, but along the way, there are these little pockets of
Really
things
good
that we did
things.
or were involved in, or these people that we knew that made an impact in our lives. And all of those things come together to create who we are today. So I want to encourage people to celebrate, and you say this to me all the time, celebrate the gift that every experience, every person, everything you've been through is, because it contributed to who you are today in ways that you
Yeah.
can't necessarily see or define.
Yeah. Especially those moments when you feel like you've fallen on the concrete and your teeth got chipped open and you have that broken nose. Those experiences doesn't feel good, never feels good when you're going through it. But you've got to have faith that that is exactly what you needed to break you open so you can get to your next whatever it is that you need, because we're the awareness of who we are as human beings, we are way beyond just our bodies, right? There is an energetic level, there is a psychological level, there's a transpersonal level of who we are. So your spirit wants to grow. This is to be alive. All living things grow in that regard. So you're just growing, and it's kind of like that seed of the pine cone. There's certain cones that will not release the seed unless they're under fire. So then it doesn't get to populate the earth again. And that's how they've evolved. And that's why the forest fires, the spontaneous ones, not the ones where someone throws a cigarette and it goes all crazy. Those are
Right.
actually advantageous to the species of that kind of tree. I'm going to talk about growth really quickly because I know that we're coming to time and I want to honor that. But this is really important for you, for anybody who's listening to this, that is especially those people who are going through transition, right? First of all, we are always going through transition. Life is one multitude of transition after another. You begin a job, you end a career, you stop a relationship, you start a relationship, you move, right? That's a transition. And if you go to the micro level, you're transitioning from brushing your teeth to combing your hair. You're transitioning from finishing eating breakfast and putting things away. So if you can accept that life is just a continuous transition, right?
Series.
A series of transitions, right? And if you take that idea of transition and you apply it to your growth in life, there's two ways to grow in life. One is Kensho, Kensho, I believe is how it's spelled. And one is Satori. So Kensho moments are the moments where life pushes you to grow because you're so stuck in where you are. You don't want to grow. You don't want things to stay like change at all. You're just stagnant. Well, life is not stagnant. Life is ever growing. The universe is always expanding, right? If you have any kind of plant, it'll grow because that's the way our nature is. So you can have Kensho moments and you don't want things to change. Things are going to change and it's going to push you. Relationships ending doesn't work and you're trying to keep it together. It doesn't work. You're going to get pushed out. It's just part of life, right? This is what forces you to grow. And then there are Satori moments. Satori moments are moments when Satori is another word, kind of like enlightenment. So if you don't want the Kensho moments, because those moments are really rough, because you don't want them to change, your heart's going to be broken open and broken open and broken open. Your finances are going to get awry. Your most important relationships are no longer going to be there. Your most beloved, fill in the blank, car, house, cat, friend, whatever, changes. Relationships, money, bankrupt, whatever. Life almost ending. Those are Kensho moments. Those are things we don't plan. So in order to grow gracefully, you want to look for Satori moments. So Satori moments means that you are actively seeking growth. You're running towards growth. You're getting educated in your mind. You're doing your shadow work with the intentional idea that, hey, I need to grow. So I'm going to run towards that fire. I'm going to go run toward whatever it is. So you're constantly challenging your belief system so that you can grow and expand. Now, however you do that, that's up to you because each of us have a different tolerance for growing, for learning, for pain, for whatever it is. Like I know that I have been through enough Kensho moments to know I don't want to be blindsided. I'm human. I'm probably going to get blindsided, but I stay kind of agile and I adjust when life needs to, but I'm always in the Satori moment because I have accepted my my blessing that I get to grow and grow and grow and grow. And so when I went to ministerial school, that was part of it. I didn't know it at the time. You know, it was time for me to go to ministerial school because I'd done all of my spiritual study. And God's like, this is next for you. And I'm going, but I don't want to run a church. I don't want to be a minister. I just want to grow. I want to deepen my walk with spirit, my spiritual understanding of how life works. So I went anyway because that was my next thing. And now I understand why I went through all of that. And it's because I'm at a place in my life where I've done my learning, I've done the hard knocks, I understand the theory, I've gotten the schooling, and I have some frameworks, and it's time now for me to give back to the world what the world gave to support me in my keeping it together, and not keeping it together, meaning like during the times when I was struggling, to now I'm no longer struggling. I'm actually thriving. And whatever life happens, I know that it happens through me. And I see them as such blessings, because they are. Even those things that are like, oh, that was interesting. So then I see things differently because I know what's on the other side. So that's what I wanted people to get and understand. Wherever you are, it's a blessing. And if you don't believe so, call Deb. She will talk you through it. And we can talk, you can call me and we can talk through it, because it's really important for us to be in community and not be in our own heads, because when you're in your own head, it's the scary place to be. You don't have any outside resources. So you don't breathe new life into whatever your processing is. And then you get stuck, and then the depression happens and melancholy, and then you might hurt yourself, and nobody wants that. You are so precious.
Right.
So
Before we end, I wanted to go back and reiterate or revisit something you said about the Kensho moments and what's the other one?
Satori
Moments that we sometimes make things harder for ourselves, because if we don't learn the lesson, we continue going to school, and we continue.
It spirals
it's a
around.
cycle. Exactly. And we keep doing the same things. If we continue to resist the lessons,
You're just gonna
right?
keep going.
Then we're just going to keep going in that spiral. So this is that opportunity to just stop. I love that you shared that today. It's an opportunity to just stop and to ask, why am I going over the same things? I was talking to a friend the other day, and we were laughing because there was a moment that she was resisting doing what she knew she was supposed to do, and her cat scratched her face. And so I said, "Oh, look, God sent you the cat to tell you, to give you a message. We will only grow and move forward as we learn our lessons."
Yes. And also, when you see the lesson coming back to you, and you can make a mental note. Oh, okay, I didn't learn it last time. What's going on? So you learn it again, and keep in mind that if you continue to resist, you're going to get smacked by a spiritual 2x4. The more you resist, the rougher it is. So just give into it and just ask, like, okay, well, I'm asked to change. The question you want to ask is, because you get the right questions, your brain's going to come up with the right answers, right? The question you want to ask is, what else is possible here? Just hold that in prayer, and you'll see movement. You'll see an answer come to you. And then call Deb, because I'm sure she'll have some.
That'll work. That'll be great.
Yeah.
Oh, Evie, Reverend Evelyn, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for sharing your story. I love when I ask people to tell their story. It says something about where they start their story. Our language locates us. And I love that you kind of went big, and you went back, and you kind of placed yourself. So here's where I started, even before I was cognitive or aware, before even I was born, and here's where I am today. And I'm so thankful for you. I'm thankful that you joined us today. I'm thankful that I've gotten to know you, that you're able to share so many good insights. And so thanks for being here tonight. Or today.
So today, yes. And one other thing about my story is just something that I lived, but I really see this as everybody's story. Because if you look at it as a metaphor, like, where did you come from and how did you get to today, right? That's a great question. And when I share it, and I share it so openly, it's not about me. It's about whoever's listening. They're going to get something out of it, and they're going to see the parallel in their life. And like, my whole message is, if I can do it, if I can do it, you can absolutely do it. And if you don't believe it, you can borrow my faith. You can borrow my courage anytime. Take my energy, because I'm plugged in. I've got an endless supply. And if I can help another person through whatever transition they're going through, and I can shift that perspective, because it's tiny, then I have lived a valid life. I have lived a valid existence. So it's just a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us on another powerful episode of the Steps Back to Me podcast. We hope you found inspiration and insights that will light your path on your journey of healing and self-discovery. And as we wrap up, always remember your story is a tapestry of strength, resilience, and hope. No matter where you are in your journey, you have the power to reclaim, reinvent, and recalibrate your life. Until next time, keep taking those steps back to the authentic you. Stay strong, stay inspired, and keep shining your light. I'm Deb J. Goodbye for now and see you on the next episode of Steps Back to Me.